gather round for this very exciting occasion. So for those of you who don't know, my name is David Mitchell. I'm the mayor of the town of Bridgewater, and I am super excited to be here. I know this has been a long time coming. We wanted to do this many years ago. There's some complications. You can all call the province and your MLA and get them to update the traffic standards. That makes it so these aren't illegal. But, you know, between Steve and our staff, we found a solution on, you know, a very busy intersection, very highly prominent, which is what we want to. But I just want to convey that this is more than just, you know, painting some colors on the road. You all know that. It's the town's way of publicly demonstrating to everyone that this is a safe, respectful, inclusive community where everyone deserves to be treated with love. And I know for many of you it doesn't feel like that. So I fielded a few calls. Why are you doing this? Why are you spending the money? Well, because some people don't have the luxury of just walking around being exactly who they want to be, a full, true expression of themselves without someone judging, hurting them. We don't have to go down all, you know. So this is just a small thing that the town can do to express that this is everyone's community, regardless of who you are, how you identify, whatever it is. This is your community. And so we are privileged to be able to do this. So I do want to thank Lunenburg Pride and our staff team for working together, and I look forward to the parade that's coming next month, our first Pride Parade. Town Council will be there with all of you, and so, you know, better things are ahead. Now I'll turn it over to Steve.
Jeez, now I gotta try not to cry. Thank you. No, I mean, like you said, this is it's a small gesture in the grand scheme of things, but it really means a lot more than just paint on a road. I know people here are part of the LGBTQ+ community. There are allies here, and the climate that we're currently living in, where there is a lot of vitriol and attacks on LGBTQ folks, especially trans people and drag queens, you know, especially when we have the events in Bridgewater next month, this will show to them that it's more than just paint. You know, this is a town that is welcome and inclusive to anyone, no matter the minority that comes out and tries to speak out against us, because, you know, we're not going anywhere. And it truly means a lot to me that we've worked through all the ups and downs with the rules and found a way to make it work, because it's so important that we have a crosswalk in Bridgewater, especially now that Bridgewater is growing and it's going to grow in the coming years. So I just want to thank everyone who came out, and this is wonderful that it happens to be in place before Pride Week next month. So I hope that anytime you're around here, whether it's during Pride Week or not, that you'll remember this very important day, and, you know, we will just keep staying positive despite all the reasons we have not to be. So thanks, everybody.
I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer owner of Gals Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so you know, we've never have left the town limits. So when we're looking to build this location, you know, we had lots of opportunity to potentially look at you know, outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, you know, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, you know, we're talking about lots of small communities, you know, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some you know, strong investment opportunities for sure.
Everyone, I'm just going to talk again. It's just the microphone on the table. When it's your time, so I'll call the special council meeting to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none. Excuse me, we have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Councilor Thorburn, seconded by Councilor McDonald. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. As always, I'll remind the public that the town of Bridgewater is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and it is our privilege to be here. This is a special council meeting, so normally we would not be meeting tonight. We'll be meeting next Monday, so there is a regularly scheduled council meeting next week, and people watching online may notice that we're not in Town Hall. Council Chambers is undergoing a renovation. So we're in the Fire Hall tonight and next Monday, and we should be back in Council Chambers for our regular September meeting. So, I don't think there's any announcements. We'll save that for next week. Are there any delegations? We do have a discussion session after this with a topic for South Shore Open Doors.
We will go right down to reports and recommendations. 9.1, Ocean Motors Limited Sanitary Sewer Connection Agreement, approval to enter into an agreement.
Okay. So council had originally received this in camera, and this is to do with the property at 15024 Highway 3, and it skirts the boundary between the town of Bridgewater and Hempel Village. In 2013, I believe it was, council received a request from GW Motors Limited for approval to connect to that property. And given that it straddled the boundary, it wasn't in the service area of the town. So the town entered into an agreement with the property owner, which noted that they would have a flat rate of $972 per year for the commercial sanitary service. The property was not developed. There was a lateral that was built to the property line, but there was never a connection to the town sewer. So if we had taken the original agreement from 2013 at $972 and escalated by the increase in rates that we've seen in our sewer bill, which the agreement said we would do, it would result in a new rate of $3,485.82 per year. And that is significantly higher than the rate that we presently charge properties that are within the sewer service area but outside of the town of Bridgewater, so in the Hempel area. And the rate that we charge outside is $1,372, I believe, or 326, sorry. per year. And so what staff had recommended council do is look at a new agreement with the new owners of the property that would result in the property essentially paying the same sewer charge that would be charged to any commercial property outside of town that is capable of being serviced by the town's central sewer system. So the recommendation is to authorize that agreement to be completed and executed.
Okay, are there any questions on this? We did discuss this already. Councilor Thorburn.
I know a little bit of the properties inside the town limits.
Tiny, tiny bit.
So are we getting a big tax
No.
fall from that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Thorburn.
I would make that motion, Your Worship. I would move that town council, the town of Bridgewater, endorse the recommendation of the engineering department and direct staff to renegotiate the G.W. Mosher Limited sanitary sewer agreement with the new owner of the property located at 15024 Highway 3 Hickville to reflect a new sanitary sewer rate consistent with the sewer rates set annually by council for commercial properties located outside the town limits, $1,326, 2023-24 rate.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to 9.2, flood emergency funding procurement for infrastructure repairs. And just before we jump on that, I know Matt is here representing engineering and public works and all the hats that he wears. Staff did an incredible job under unbelievably difficult circumstances. Bridgewater specifically received the most rain in the province in what was the historic rainfall and the most rain the province has ever received in that short a period of time. Overall, we have 2 road closures really, but for our infrastructure to take that kind of a pounding and only have 2 road closures is remarkable. I was out at 2 a.m. with the police chief and like a little army of ants, you could see town trucks rolling around town, stopping here, stopping there, checking things, clearing things. So just on behalf of everyone, really, Matt, if you can just pass on our thanks to your team, your larger team, for all the work they did. I am amazed at the end of the day to have one section of Victoria Road and obviously at the bridge on King Street, but it could have been much worse. Thank you for that. Well, back on course, sorry.
All right. So we have had 2 recent flooding events that have resulted in the need for emergency repairs to town infrastructure. So what that means is it wasn't time to come get unbudgeted approval from council. The decision was made to do the procurement. So we're coming in after the fact to let you know, get council's agreement for the unbudgeted expenditure, and we used alternative procurement, given the fact that there wasn't time to go out for tenders and wait a month or 2 months to get the results of that and have that approved. So we have the wastewater treatment plant, and that has an approximate value of $336,000. So there was flooding that occurred there on June 5th. It had resulted in the wastewater treatment plant having about 6 feet of sewage water in the basement. And in the basement, we store pumps, blowers, there's electrical, etc. that's in the basement. So all that got covered in sewage water. And what we've been trying to do is determine the source of the flooding. And so staff, we have divers in to look at the outfalls, and there's a number of things that we're doing. So with the repairs to the wastewater treatment plant and the requirement to find the source, because without finding the source and addressing that, every time it would rain, heavy rain, it would result in us having to do a voluntary overflow into the river, because it would flood the plant otherwise, because it wasn't going up the other end. So we've had to undertake that work, and we're still in the process of investigating that. I believe the last I talked to Audrey, she was having divers come in into the Lehigh River to look at the outfall pipe to see if there was a blockage occurring there. So the cost for that work is anticipated to be $336,000. And she has noted what that entails. There's basement equipment repair and replacement of $30,000, effluent line inspection and repair of $145,000, and the installation of new storm sewer for separation of $163,000. And alternative procurement was used for that as well, given our permitting requirements to not have overflows and to ensure that we're able to receive the effluent as it comes into the plant. There wasn't time to do the procurement process we normally do. The flooding that occurred on July 21st, and as the mayor indicated, we had two road closures, but those have resulted in some significant infrastructure costs to the town. So Victoria Road, there was some flood damage there, and it's resulted in Victoria Road being closed. What we did there was we had just issued a tender for High Street, and I believe Dexter's was doing that work. And High Street work can't occur if Victoria Road Street is closed, because that's one of the detour routes. So we essentially did a change order to the High Street tender to have Dexter's come in immediately and start work on Victoria Road, which they have done. So the work consists of repairing the road surface, curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and that has an estimated cost of $250,000. And we use alternative procurement to do that as well. And Matt, are they done that?
There is still surface work to be done, so it's hard to put traffic back on it without that done.
Okay, so a little bit more surface work and then the road will reopen. The last is the Vino Bridge on King Street. And as you know, King Street is closed. That section of King Street is closed. And there we had a pedestrian walkway that had significant damage done to it, compromised, and that threatened Vino Bridge as well. We have a water line and we have a sewer line that were connected to that pedestrian bridge or walkway. The water line was fractured and the sewer line, is, in Matt's words, is hanging by a thread. So it's still functioning, but it was hanging, and the hanging's been compromised. So until Vino Bridge is replaced by the province, which they had planned to do some work at, I believe next year or the year after, we were planning on connecting it to the bridge as opposed to a pedestrian walkway. But until the province addresses Vino Bridge, we need to find a temporary reroute for both the water line and the sewer line. So the water line would be a PSC expense, but the sewer line would be a town of Bridgewater expense. So that expense, together the two are $333,000, but the sewer line is, I believe, $167,000. And so we're looking for a temporary routing of that, basically moving it upstream a bit and utilizing private property with the owner's permission to just run it further up along the brook. Alternative procurement is required to do that as well, because we can't wait for that, given the fact that it's hanging by a thread. And the water is a critical loop for the town system, so that has to be done immediately as well. So I believe we have about a 6 to 8 week window of which we plan to get that done. The pedestrian bridge, the end, I guess, the plan for that is to have it connected to the Vino Bridge. So we will follow our normal procurement process for that, but right now we're working with the province to determine when those repairs will be done, when it can be reopened again. And I believe you're in conversations, Matt's in conversations with them right now about that. So those are the expenses. They total around $919,000 for the town, and that excludes the PSC's capital. So over $1 million essentially thus far for water and wastewater. That does not include any of the parks and the damage done to the parks and work that we've had to do there. This is purely just for this procurement, and it's $919,000. It's proposed that we would fund this from the undesignated operating reserves. So when we have operating surplus, those just surplus in general, we typically put it into operating reserve. It's not designated for any one particular project. So there are funds sufficient to offset that. I believe Kim is looking at a surplus this year, so that'll help replenish that when we pull this money out. And of course, given this work, staff will be looking at the capital plan because it is going to interfere with our ability to do our capital plan as we had proposed, because staff have been busy repairing bridges in our parks and trails in our parks and those things that it's taken them away from some of our other projects like pavement management and those types of things. So Matt will be reviewing and is reviewing the capital plan with the staff, and we'll present that to council at a later date to let you know that. But there may be some offsetting funds from not doing some of the capital projects this year that can help offset this expense as well, the $919,000.
Is any of this going to be eligible for disaster funding that we anticipate will be released by the province?
We are tracking all expenses, labor, material, contracting. That's the result of the flooding. And so there has been some disaster funding announced. It takes some time to get that funding, and I don't anticipate we'll get that in this fiscal year.
Because for some like Halifax, it could take years, right?
Years, yeah, years.
Any questions? Councilor Caldwell?
Do you have any estimated timelines on when Vina Bridge and Victoria Road will be reopened for traffic?
I think Matt, you have to come up here.
We have a podium you can go to. It's your favorite.
Just a minor correction, because I love numbers. It says in the council motion $167,000 for sewer. It should be $333,000, but the overall 919 is the correct number.
So 333,000 is sewer in
Is sewer
water?
is just the sewer portion.
Okay.
$500,000 for both,
Yeah.
2/3, 1/3. Just wanted to make that correction. In terms of the Vino Bridge reopening, I have been in conversation with Department of Transportation, Nova Scotia Public Works, on what they need to do in order to safely reopen it. So I'm just waiting for them to get back to me in terms of that timeline, what needs to be done, if anything, and what timeline. The last message I got from them is they're looking to work cooperatively with the town to make sure it's safely reopened. But I don't have a timeline at this point. Hopefully soon, because we do know that school starts.
Victoria Road? Victoria Road's the one that I'm concerned about, because it affects the work on High Street and St. Philip Street,
So yeah, we do need to complete the resurfacing in that area, but they are looking to look at the closure that we have in place, because it would need to be done to do some of the water main replacement as part of the original project. So we're trying to be efficient with that closure and get that work done. And the contractor, as of today, should be on site doing some work.
Okay. Other questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Just note that King Street sewer line is 333,000.
Yeah.
Correct.
I move that the town council of the town of Bridgewater approve the unbudgeted expenditures required for emergency repairs to town infrastructure with estimated values being approximately wastewater treatment plant, $336,000 approximate value, Victoria Road repairs, $250,000 approximate value, King Street rerouting and temporary sewer line, $333,000 approximate value, with the final costs for the above noted items to be funded from the undesignated operating reserve, and that council authorize alternative procurement for the above noted work pursuant to section 18.1A of policy 79, purchasing and tendering.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Conklin. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Agenda business arising from unfinished business. Logan Road, declaration of land as part of surplus road. Housekeeping item.
Yeah. So if you look in the package that's included with your agenda for this particular item, there's a survey plan that shows a star, and that star is inside a tiny parcel, PID 60383585, and that is owned by the town of Bridgewater. But it was not picked up as part of the survey of Logan Road. And in fact, it is part of the Logan Road right away. So this is really a housekeeping item. The council's required to declare properties public streets. When the public streets or any part of land that's part of the public street, they're required to declare it as a public street. It's a land registration requirement at the registry office. So this was missed, and in order to convey this as phase 2 of the Logan Road property that was deemed surplus. We need to capture that as part of the public street. So that requires that there be a declaration approved by council that would essentially declare that that parcel is part of Logan Road. And that's what the motion is. So it's really a housekeeping item. The lawyers picked it up when they were preparing some of the property for transfer and brought it to our attention.
Pretty straightforward. Any questions? If there's none, can someone please put a motion on the floor? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Your Worship. I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater authorize the execution of a statutory declaration declaring that the parcel PID number 60383535 shall form part of Logan Road, of which the said declaration shall be in reasonable accordance with the draft presented by staff, subject to final review and revision by Town Solicitor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to new business. We're down to our last item for the special council meeting. So Housing Accelerator Fund for CMHC, endorsement of action plan and application. Director of Community Services. Community Development, sorry.
Community Development, thank you. Thank you very much. Get used to this podium. Just one moment. So, staff first came to you on April 3rd to identify this potential funding opportunity through the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation Housing Accelerator Fund, and received your direction to go forward and create an application. So this is the result of that work. Okay, so just as a brief reminder, what is the Housing Accelerator Fund? It is a program that is going to encourage initiatives that increase housing supply in communities and promote the development of affordable, inclusive, and diverse communities that are also low carbon and climate resilient. So the priority objectives are the ones that you see on the screen here, and all projects and applications will be evaluated related to how they help meet CMHC's priority objectives to create more supply of housing, to support affordable, inclusive, equitable, and diverse communities, to support complete and walkable communities with diverse land uses and access to amenities, and to support low carbon, climate resilient communities. So what can Housing Accelerator Fund money be spent on? It's been quite a journey to really understand what CMHC's intent for this funding is. So in all of the materials it talks about, it can be spent on the action plans that are required. It can be spent on affordable housing, and it can be spent on housing related infrastructure and community related infrastructure. And it goes into larger detail. And just as a really important point, eligible expenses do include existing staff and their time spent on the Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives within an application, or new staff resources, or what have you. But a key evolution in our staff's understanding of CMHC's intent is when we came to you in April, we thought this is really exciting. We would be able to incent some housing development and use the revenue generated through this funding to help offset our large infrastructure challenges that we have. And while that is partially true, it is not the entire truth in terms of their intent for this this project. So a quote that we really took to heart when we were attending, there's been a lot of workshops, there's a bi-weekly drop-in session, etc. And so our grant coordinator wrote this down because it was really key, that they were very clear that the Housing Accelerator Fund is not an infrastructure or capital program. So it's not like some of the other ones that we've gone after funding for to support our wastewater renewal. Initiatives should be about housing units and work that aims to improve housing systems. So infrastructure is part of that, but it cannot be all of that. So with that understanding in mind, and with the fact that a lot of the strategic priorities of council are focused around the same type of things, around our housing supply, understanding our infrastructure constraints that would be holding us back, you know, doing climate resilience work, our flood risk work, and our Energized Bridgewater work. We really took that as the framing for what the Housing Accelerator Fund application could include. So just another quick piece, there's certain requirements that must be included in an application. So that's growth projections. We've done a lot, and I know that in April 3rd, we brought forward some of that work. We've continued to refine that understanding. We needed a housing needs assessment, and we have received an embargoed and draft version of the housing needs assessment that the province has done for all municipalities across the province. So for those that they knew were applying for the Housing Accelerator Fund, we are not allowed to share it publicly, but I am allowed to say that we've received it, and that's as far as it goes. But we were, which was useful because the information in it helped us with our growth projections. And then you have to have a housing action plan, and then obviously complete application form. So what we're really talking, what I'm really bringing forward to you tonight is an overview of the 6 initiatives that we're proposing as our housing action plan. As a small community under 10,000 people, we must have 5 initiatives within the housing action plan. So we have 6. If we were larger, like our neighbors, the District of Lunenburg, they are over 10,000 people, so they must have a minimum of 7. So that's how it goes. And then Halifax is in a category all of its own. So please don't compare us there. Okay, so where are we in meeting these requirements? Just quickly on our growth projections. What you see here is a graph that looks, so on the left side and then on the right side, there's 2 boxes. So we, in order to look at what we might accelerate, because this is about, if you are doing these pieces in your housing action plan, can you approve more housing, building permits for housing developments faster? So can you accelerate some of that? So you have to look back to see what your average growth is, to see what you've done over the past number of years, and then use that as your base. So what you see in blue is all of our base growth. So you look in 2018 to 2022, our average through that 5-year period was 72 new units of housing that were issued permits for in that time frame. So we used 72 units for the 3 years of the duration of the program, and that is 216 residential units that CMHC anticipates we would be providing as a matter of our normal growth, not accelerated growth, but normal growth. So then they ask each municipality to then propose how much accelerated growth do you think you can do if you undertake these initiatives. So based on our current as of right activity, our current development agreements that have received approval or are in the queue, we did our best estimate in terms of how much, recognizing that we have infrastructure constraints at the same time. So instead of saying we could do 300 to try to get as much money as possible, we had to be to try to mitigate our risk, we tried to be very realistic about the ones that we see as being able to move forward if we can remove some barriers through some of the longer term, larger pieces of work that we anticipate doing. So we expect that over 3 years, we will aim to issue building permits, and that's the other distinction. It doesn't mean that the housing is lived in, it means that the permits have been issued. Building permits have been issued for those units, and we're expecting and hoping that all of this work will enable us to provide 383 units of building permit issuance within the 3 years of the Housing Accelerator Fund, with 216 of that being existing development. You all with me here? It's it's more complicated than it needs to be in our opinion, but we did not make the program. So let me walk you through the action plan initiatives that staff are proposing would help to incent these 167 additional units over the base growth that we already anticipate. I see we're a little bit cut off there, so you can't see the full slide title, but these are the proposed housing action plan initiatives. And they use those 2 terms, just to be clear, they use them pretty interchangeably in all the material. It doesn't, the action plan, we actually received confirmation from CMHC today we asked a very specific question. Does it need to be a separate plan document? You know, like some of our other pieces of work, and it doesn't. It's what's contained in the application is our action plan. So there's we're proposing an affordable housing incentive program, and infrastructure constraints, understanding infrastructure constraints and cost of development as our initiative number 2. Number 3 is regional building services and enhanced permitting. Number 4, partnering with nonprofit organizations for housing. Number 5, a climate resilience policy and program pilot. And number 6, updating our planning documents to align with growth. So those are the 6. I'm just going to walk you through as relatively briefly as I can. And I believe it's probably hard for you to see what is here, but this information is contained in your council report, along with the summary of the proposed initiative. So the Affordable Housing Initiative will create an incentive program for the development and long-term sustainability of affordable housing in the community. We'll explore a range of actions, including waiving permitting fees, other charges, phasing in or waiving property taxes over time, and providing seed money for new affordable housing projects. In addition, it will stimulate disposal of town-owned land for housing and expand the current Energized Bridgewater Home Upgrades program to include multifamily housing aimed at preserving the town's existing stock of housing through our normal, through the developing the Energized Bridgewater program to make homes more energy efficient and climate resilient. So there's a number of different items that we're proposing in here, but I'm just going to draw your attention to the way the budget works, which is that, and I forgot to go over this or put a slide in on this, but there's a base amount of funding. There's quite a complicated formula, and it depends on a variety of things. What type of housing? Is it apartment or what they call the missing middle or single unit dwellings? And there's a range and a ratio. So after we input all of our information through the growth projections, it's about an average of $33,000 per unit for our incentive units that we would be able to generate in revenue. And you also have to assign how many units do you think you will incent through this initiative. So we're proposing to incent 48 units that will generate approximately $1.6 million of revenue in the 3 years, but cost $1.1 million in expense. So the types of components or milestones within this initiative are about, and we've started some of this work already, and that's another piece that's eligible, is that work prior to the announcement of this program in April of 2022 is eligible, so long as it's not complete and it's not an entire initiative. And staff and council have been having the beginnings of the conversation around affordable housing and refining its definition and understanding like what an incentive policy could be. So that's really how this particular initiative was built off, those previous conversations we've been having on and off since 2021 when the Housing Commission was initiated for the province. So it's looking at developing affordable housing policy and a revised definition. And looking at how that then works with all the existing policies that the town has. Developing a program and partnership for the preservation of existing rental housing, so how the Energized Bridgewater work is supporting that preservation of existing affordable housing. Developing and implementing an incentive grant program to help offset the rising cost of building housing in Bridgewater that's preventing people from creating more affordable housing. Potentially establishing a program to support and incent accessory dwelling units, which are now enabled through the housing supply amendments that were brought forward and approved by council late last fall. And then of course also engagement, promotion, and awareness of any and all of that program. And within the budget, about 50% is for program implementation, predominantly the grant component, with staff, consultants, legal, and communications making up a lot of the rest of it, and a large part also being existing initiatives that staff are currently working on. The second initiative, we might need to adjust for the next council meeting because you can't actually see the full presentation back. So the next initiative is understanding infrastructure constraints and costs of development. This again is another priority item of council's at the moment. The budget is proposed to be about $1.2 million in terms of expense, incenting, wrong button, incenting 62 units of housing above and beyond the base growth and generating approximately $2 million in revenue. And this one is about 50% program implementation again, and as well as other work that is currently ongoing. So in the approved budget for this fiscal year includes the development charges work that we're doing, where we've issued an RFP, and we're hoping to begin to work with a consultant to help us develop those development charges, understand the true cost of development so we can spread it more equally between taxpayers and new development that's coming in. So part of it will go to those reports and studies. Then we'll need to develop a policy and implement that policy. But in the meantime, how do we address some of the barriers that our infrastructure is posing to allowing some of the proposed developments to go forward? So we're proposing that we would have an interim cost contribution model where we would be able to assess things that might not be in our capital budget and might not be in the next 3-year plan, but a housing development may be reliant upon it. So there would be money that we would be able to do to unblock that within this proposed initiative. So something for the 3 years during the Housing Accelerator Fund, and then the long-term piece where we'll bring that consistency and transparency of the cost of developing in the town of Bridgewater, which right now is uncertain with our existing wastewater woes. The third item is the regional building service and enhanced permitting. So this is really, this is in our budget right now, where we're looking at, and we currently are purchasing service from our neighboring municipality for building service. And so how do we build off that, and how do we move to our electronic records management that will help improve our building permitting processes? How do we improve our software that we have to enable more like payment online and those sorts of things? So it would encompass that work. Staff haven't started on this work yet, but it is in a large part of it, about 3/5 is in the existing budget and planned. But what is especially new here is the proposal that there would be a new assistant development officer to help facilitate the processing of permits here within the town, and enabling our current development officer, who's also the manager of planning and development, to be doing managerial work, but also working on those complex, because our larger developments are getting larger and more complex, especially with the wastewater situation. So looking at bringing in some additional capacity for that one, as well as looking at ensuring consistency of interpretation of the building code and helping to speed up the review process and things. And we've been discussing this with the District of Lunenburg, so that we would both have this in our Housing Accelerator Fund applications, and hopefully that would bring more weight to the evaluation team. So those are the items here, and that transition to electronic records management being a big portion of this particular initiative. So number 4 is partnering with nonprofits for housing. So I know that we have in the next meeting, the discussion session meeting, we'll be talking with the South Shore Open Doors Association, and they came in February with an opportunity that they want to partner with us on and pursue. And that was the first, but we hope it's not the last, and we know that as you make your way through a first process, it can be challenging to figure out, set those expectations and really know what the process might look like, what the pathway is. And so we thought it would make sense to try to bring an initiative forward related to this, where we would then be able to expand our existing partnership that we have with SODA, they're our core partner in our Energize Bridgewater, expand it into the work that they're proposing with affordable housing, and really bring some, learn from the existing process and create some clear process and expectations to that. So the ultimate, from expanding our existing relationship through to having a policy and a framework for which, if a new nonprofit organization comes forward wanting to do affordable housing, we have a clear pathway between council and the nonprofit to understand how that could be, and where we could also look at how we might want to dispose of town-owned land and have a clear process for how we do that also. So that's really what this one is for. And again, the big new piece in terms of a budget component to it would be to have some money for the town to be able to provide some direct support for the affordable housing proposals from a nonprofit. The fifth initiative is the Climate Resilience Policy and Pilot Program. So this, I forgot to go back to the partnering with nonprofits. Right, so just a little bit less than 600,000, an estimated budget over 3 years with 26 incented units, generating approximately $870,000 of revenue from the HALF program. So moving over to Climate Resilience Policy and Pilot Program, it's about a $500,000 budget with only incenting about 8 units of housing, so only generating about $270,000 of revenue. But stormwater and the increasing our resilience in the face of climate change and the impacts that we're experiencing is important, and we felt it was actually important enough to create a separate initiative for it. We actually have an existing request for proposals that was put out to the public right now related to our flood risk planning policies in our planning documents related to the Lehave River Development Agreement area, and looking for some additional work to help support the application from the Molly development. So there's that, but also as we work through our 10-year capital budget and work through the planned upgrades related to our stormwater and wastewater, we've been talking about, our focus is on our infrastructure, but there are some things that private property owners can also do to assist with stormwater management on site as they're developing or even in developed neighborhoods. And so we would look to, we've never had the funding available to us to sort of get that additional capacity we might need to create such a program that it could accompany those infrastructure upgrades in the street with a program that we could have to support private property owners to do something like disconnecting their stormwater leaders from the street and from our systems. So this is looking at our flood risk erosion adaptation study, but also developing low impact design and stormwater disconnection program, and then implementing that program and how we would do that. So that's the focus of the fifth initiative. And moving on to the final one, our plan review. So reviewing our planning documents and aligning them to the growth. So again, this is really more about that system change and not about immediate change. So it's about a $300,000 cost, but only generating about $170,000 because we're only putting 5 units of accelerated growth related to this. Because this is a longer project, and that growth or any additional units won't really come for a few years until we progress through and perhaps adjust more of our policies. The target for the review of our existing planning documents would be housing, climate, and infrastructure. And that has been Council's priorities, and we would do, rather than examining everything, perhaps this part would help with a focused review of our policies related to those 3 themes. So we'd also look to reviewing our processes to streamline for efficiencies we might be able to find. So what needs to go by development agreement versus a site plan approval or as of right permissions based on the alignment of our infrastructure and our upgrades to our infrastructure. So trying to bridge that gap between the full development potential, our existing infrastructure constraints, and trying to meet Council's priorities and goals and objectives. So not a large moneymaker for the Housing Accelerator Fund perspective, but really hits on their other criteria about creating long-term systemic change to the housing supply and process here in the town of Bridgewater. So setting those growth targets, policy reviews, etc. Around budget and risk. Because this is not your normal funding proposal, it's even very different than our Smart Cities funding stream, where the funding is tied to the ability to approve building permits for residential units. That's their main piece that they look at, and our ability to meet the milestones. So we really looked at how to capture the work that we're already doing, because council has already put us on this path. There's a lot of the items in your now priority bucket and in your next priority bucket for your strategic priorities that fall within this work. And of course, it does stretch over 3 years, so some of it is longer term. Some of it we do require new resources in order to complete, and some of it we're going to be doing some of the work anyway. So I do believe when we were discussing it around a table, staff table recently, we were talking about there are some coupons and rebates that we could get from this, where we might be able to, because a portion of a staff time is associated with moving this initiative forward, we'd sort of get a coupon for that level of work, and rebates on some of the work that we've already done that is part of that foundation to get some of this work done, or work that is currently in our approved 2023-24 budget. So we were looking through that. So that's why you see here the 6 initiatives, the budget total of the revenue of approximately $5.6 million, with the expense of, again, this is an estimate at this point, of $4.5 million. So that's about a $1.1 million difference. And then we looked at how the cash flow would go over the 3 years. So within that, there's a handful of new commitments. So a new assistant development officer position is one. New grants to support affordable housing and climate resilience. That interim policy for cost sharing infrastructure required to support housing projects. Direct support for nonprofit housing, and costs for consultants or community partners to undertake key pieces of work, whether it's a service or a program delivery or something like that. That's the vast majority of the expense, including staff time, legal, communications, etc. So some of those existing commitments, as I said, staff time on current strategic initiatives, costs for consultants to undertake key pieces of the work already approved. So specifically the development charges request for proposal, the flood risk request for proposal, the record scanning for permitting, permit software. There's some others that are much smaller, and also projects that were completed between May 2022 and now, so for the past 13 months or so, that are fundamental to the proposed initiatives. So there are some rebates, so to speak, if you use that language. So that was how we were attempting to mitigate the risk of making this application, because we're really trying to support the work that's already happening, because we're already trying to meet many of those objectives that this funding program is here for. So part of it was also looking at the yearly cash flow. So I did turn this table is direct from your report, but when we look at the year over year, 46% of the year one expenses are actually already in an approved budget. That was one of our mitigating measures for the risk, in that we have some budget there already committed to doing this work. And so can we do that and leverage the existing work into adding some of that additional value to the initiative, such as having some grant money to provide to help incent affordable housing, or having money in the budget for something that's not yet in our capital budget but might be that barrier to getting some housing, that infrastructure piece, etc. What you're allowed to do with the money, remaining effort, right. I'll just go back. There is on the last page of the report is the appendix that says what you can spend money on. So going back to, you can spend money on housing and community related infrastructure. So if you're demonstrating progress in your initiatives and you're getting them done and you're incenting these new units, then you can start to spend your money on other projects that aren't directly connected to these initiatives. So it could be looking to the capital budget and seeing if there's something like a key piece of community infrastructure that we've pushed off because we're prioritizing our wastewater work, that we might be able to bring back and do sooner than we had intended. So that's why I had that small list of just some things that we might be able to do that we currently don't have. But again, that's not you plan it right now. So even if we make the application, we're not committed to doing those things and moving them forward in the budget. So the remaining effort to complete our application is to finalize these milestones and timelines for all the initiatives. To conduct the self-assessment. So there's a self-assessment you have to do. There's a score out of 20 points. Affordable housing policy incentive policy rather, scored 18 out of 20 on my preliminary assessment, which is why it's initiative number 1. But the plan review only scored 10 because it doesn't incent units, like because of the criteria. But now that once we finalize all the milestones and the timelines, we'll do a reevaluation of it, and maybe that will increase its ability to score a little bit higher. There's a financial attestation by the Director of Finance. Council approval gives us a lot more strength, and then that final application must be submitted in the portal, which is a little bit less than user-friendly, so it certainly requires more than a day's worth of notice. The application is due on August 18th, which is why we're speaking with you here tonight. So I know that was really lengthy, but there's a lot of content and the program is not straightforward. So I appreciate your patience. Any questions?
Questions from council? It's a lot to digest.
It is.
So Jessica, can I just, so council understands, the risk is essentially, if you go back to that slide right there, some of the stuff we're already doing, which is existing operating expenses, so that's already planned out. They give their money in advance of the initiative, so year 1 you get it November, so the 191 is really not at risk because, well, some of it is because it's not quite all funded, right? Right. So if we don't meet our milestones with the year 2 report, we don't get that next infusion of cash, or not all of it. So the risk is that we may, if we don't meet those milestones, it may actually cost you, right?
It may cost a little bit, but they won't, all indications is that they do not take the money back. Right. But they do not give you the final, they will adjust. So you're correct, and I did mean there is some information in the council report, and I forgot to put a slide in here, but upon approval and signing of the contribution agreement, you get the first installment of, if it's a quarter of the disbursement. And they may not approve the entire amount. They might say, you're not going to meet 167, but we'll fund you for 100. So there's a lot of uncertainty still, so they might still say, yes, we like this, but because your 6th initiative is only going to generate 5, we're not going to fund you for that. We don't know. I know that probably almost every municipality in this country is applying for this. It is $4 billion, but everybody has a lot of need. So we don't know what we will actually be approved for. I'm hoping we are approved. Should you give us the direction to apply for it tonight. So you get the first installment before year 1, you get the second installment after year 1. The third installment after year 2 is where they will adjust if you're not meeting the milestones and you're not issuing any permits that can be attributed to the milestones. So the risk hits right here in particular, and I don't know about the opportunity to withdraw from the program either.
So the risk is essentially that net cash flow is in a negative for the first 2 years, and then it starts to catch up in year 3 and 4. So it's about $600,000.
Yeah, and it must all be spent by the end of the reporting period, so around the end of March 2027.
Councilor McDonald.
When we're talking about milestones, sorry, does that mean units by a certain date?
No, and yes. So the milestones are, so for each initiative, so if I go back to say, we'll go to the plan review. So this is a milestone. We're going to set growth targets for 10 to 20 years. We're going to have a timeline associated with when that will be. Will that be in year 1, year 2, year 3? So these are the milestones. We're also setting a target for how many incented units would be approved in year 1, year 2, year 3. Not specifically for plan review, but just overall. They don't ask for it to be completely tied. So again, this is why it's been such a, it's like learning a gymnastics routine. There's been all these things where like we think we understand it, and then We attend, staff will attend one of the sessions with CMHC, we'll ask her a question, and we'll come back going, I guess we gotta try that again. So that's sort of where we've been with this. But so those milestones will be, did we set those growth targets on time? Did we then move into the next piece where we started the policy review? Did we then move into the next piece? And those are the parts that we're reporting on. It's all very formulaic. It will be in the portal, is our understanding. There will be, they describe it as micro level permit information that they'll start expecting by year 2, not year 1, but by year 2. So it's that combination.
Councilor Copeland.
Okay, worst case scenario, what would be our total exposure on the expense side?
Okay, so in very rough numbers, 3 million. But like that's based on, so the way that looks is that we have, so the expense is 4.5 million, but we have approximately $1.5 million in approved operating expenses already planned.
Yes,
so
okay.
That's why I'm like super rough, back of the envelope, we're looking at 3 million that has not already been in a budget somewhere and approved.
And that's phased in though, year 1, year 2, year 3.
Correct.
So
Yep.
if in year 2 we don't hit those housing targets, which that, to be honest, that's where my concern is because there's a lot of variables that influence whether or not houses get built or permits get applied for beyond our policy,
Interest rates. Yeah.
Interest rates, there's labor shortages, material costs, all those things that can play into there. So that's where I almost see the risk in year 2 when they start factoring that in. If we don't meet it, we don't get that next influx, and we're in the red by 600,000 by that point.
So one of the other pieces to that is that some of the pieces relate to a large amount that's been set aside for post grant. So we might be able to get a lot of the policy work done, but not have the grants to back it up. There's well over $1 million worth of grants related to or cost sharing proposed in this. And I don't have the total for that type of initiative right now at my fingertips. I didn't print that sheet off, but I can provide that additional estimation at this point if you'd like it.
Councilor McDonald, did you have a follow-up question?
It's been answered.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? Councilor Tanner?
Just, Jessica, just for my clarity, the assistant development officer, what role will they play if we're farming so much out to consultants and community partners to get the work done?
They're the internal, like, issuing permits, reviewing per the land use bylaw.
So that'd be their primary role.
That'd be the primary role. Also assisting with the plan review and those things, but we've tied it to the enhanced permitting initiative, but it would be able to support all the housing action plan initiatives.
And assistant development officer is enough of a level to deal with that, to manage that, to be capable of doing that?
Well, it's not managing the entire program.
Yeah. No,
so, but to, yes, it would be doing development officer duties is what we envision. There's more details on that in terms of how we're, you know, we haven't allowed ourselves to run down the road of exactly how we'd envision fitting that resource into the overall team in the exact sort of pieces that we'd see, but yes, ultimately it would be there helping to move permits faster, which is what CMHC wants to see.
Councilor McDonald.
So after year 2, we're in the red, we need to start seeing units, and we still got wastewater issues. How do we start seeing units? How do we fulfill that?
That's part of our risk.
Yeah.
We were not allowed to bring our risk, our base growth down to 0, which is what we almost proposed we do. But that was not allowed by CMHC.
And we are doing, like, with some of the infrastructure work that we have planned in our capital plan over the next couple of years, there are some pinch points that we're proposing to see addressed, which will open up certain parts of town, but it certainly is, like, that was probably one of the more disappointing parts of this, was that initially it was understood that we could use it for infrastructure, because if you had to choose between red tape and infrastructure, well, I can reduce all the red tape I want, but the pipe's full. so it doesn't matter, right? So that seemed to be on the ground our biggest issue. But this fund doesn't allow for that unless it's some of the bonus funding we get if we reach those targets.
And if it's really tied to the initiative, so some of that granularity may become more clear as we really lay out how the different initiatives, particularly the infrastructure constraints and development charges piece, may work. But it's really hard. It's really hard to determine exactly what that could be at this point because there's still some discrepancy from the messaging we've been getting from CMHC. Without seeing in black and white the contribution agreement specific to our proposal, it's really hard to know exactly what we might be able to use as our like this is completely tied to the initiative related to, you know, this part of our housing action plan per this funding agreement. So it's just, there's still a lot of gray, unfortunately. I wish I could bring a lot more black and white, but it's hard.
So based on that response, Jessica, does that mean the timeline is going to shift considerably, the proposed timeline that is included in the report? Because it doesn't seem like that's possible to me.
So in terms of?
Well, just advancement of funding and so on, like, you know, fall 2023.
We had to do our best guess with the information that they've given us, but the only definitive thing that they've said is that the clock basically starts when the contribution agreement is signed. And then when we go to that timeline in the report, right, where it says fall, winter, those sorts of things, that's as clear as CMHC has made it for us. So all those timelines will shift in accordance with how long it takes CMHC to go through all the applications and award them. And so if it takes them longer than they think, everything will shift accordingly. And that's the best as I understand it, which is why the application is very prescribed. It's not, there's no real room for essay responses to their questions. It is very much numbers, facts. They have the formulas, and we have to provide the backing to go with our proposal. I think because to make it easier to review hundreds and hundreds of applications, they've made it very quantitative.
Can I ask that just, I guess, because to the earlier point about infrastructure and timelines, like the further out we actually put our signature on the agreement might be a benefit to us ultimately in the end.
Very true.
Oh, okay, all right.
Very true.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Thorburn?
Do you think it's realistic, based on the situation we're in with our infrastructure, that we can take this on for another 127 units when we already have 216 units that we're trying to get done? That's 388 units. That seems like quite a task, considering the amount of roadblocks we have with our current infrastructure and how much we are cutting back.
It is, however, it is also a fraction of the proposed units in town. So that's the balance we were trying to strike between what we know from the development proposals and the development agreements approved already that haven't yet gotten their shovel in the ground. It is definitely, from some of our earlier iterations of this work, we had the bar much higher, and we have brought it down as close to what we think might be realistic, but there are a lot of things, but it's true, then balancing whether it can actually get a permit to be built because of our wastewater constraints, it's a very good question, but we might not be able to.
I think
In
a great
all
presentation,
honesty,
and thank you. I learned a lot tonight. You can read so much, but when you provide commentary, it really strikes home. Thank you for a job well done.
Thanks.
Any other questions? If not, can I have a motion to direct staff to submit the application? Councilor Thorburn, would you like to make that motion?
I would so move that town council for the town of Bridgewater direct staff to submit the CMHC Housing Auxiliary Fund application with the initiatives as proposed in the draft housing action plan as outlined in staff's report recorded as document number 23-110.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Coghlan. Further discussion?
Question?
Question being called. Oh, you got a question?
I just wanted to say that the report is fantastic. All of that action plan is very important work. The unfortunate part is that it doesn't address what we need to address, but thank you for that work. And the information even in this is really important, and the information we could collect from the work is really important. Just unfortunately not the right target for us.
Pipes in the ground.
Yeah.
All right, we have a mover and seconder. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. That's the end of the agenda for our special council meeting. We're going to take like a 2-minute break and then we'll go into our discussion session. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councilor Norman, seconded by Councilor Caldwell. We are adjourned.